The Intergalactic Council, a powerful coalition of the most influential species in the galaxy, convened in an urgent, high-level meeting. Frustration filled the chamber as representatives from various factions debated Earth's refusal to comply with the Council's newly imposed trade laws. These laws were designed to limit human expansion, control Earth's economy, and assert the Council's authority over a species they viewed as upstarts. Humanity's defiance was seen as a direct challenge, a dangerous precedent that could not be allowed to stand. After hours of heated discussion, the Council reached a unanimous decision: Earth had to be made an example of. Their defiance would be punished swiftly and publicly to maintain the Council's dominance across the galaxy. The Council's leaders authorized the deployment of a massive fleet to Earth's orbit, confident that a show of overwhelming force would compel humanity to surrender. They issued an ultimatum: Earth had 24 hours to comply with the new trade laws or face severe consequences. The message was broadcast across all known space, a stern declaration that was meant to cow not just Earth, but any other species that might consider defying the Council's authority. Submit, they demanded, or be destroyed. The Council's arrogance was palpable. They believed this would be a swift and decisive operation. Earth's leaders, however, were undeterred. Aware of the incoming threat, they gathered in emergency session. They listened to the Council's ultimatum and, after a brief, intense discussion, unanimously decided that they would not bow to this pressure. Earth's response was immediate and resolute. They broadcast their own message to the galaxy. "We will not comply. We will not surrender." The declaration was clear and defiant, resonating across human and alien channels alike. It was a stark reminder that Earth valued its freedom and would not be intimidated into submission. The Council scoffed at the response, dismissing it as the last gasp of a desperate and inferior species. They were confident in their fleet's ability to crush any resistance and believed that Earth's leaders were making a foolish mistake. The fleet commander, assured of his swift victory, began to finalize the attack plans. To the Council, this was not a war but a disciplinary action. They anticipated a quick battle, followed by a complete surrender. Meanwhile, Earth's military leaders wasted no time. They understood the gravity of the situation and knew that they were facing an enemy with vastly superior numbers and technology. However, surrender was never an option. They immediately began analyzing the Council's fleet movements, studying likely attack patterns, and identifying strategic points that needed reinforcement. Defense installations were fortified, and reserve forces were mobilized. The message was clear: they would use every resource, every bit of ingenuity, and every ounce of courage they possessed to defend their planet. Preparations for war accelerated. Engineers worked around the clock, enhancing orbital defenses, laying traps, and recalibrating weapons systems. Scientists developed new countermeasures to deal with the Council's advanced technology, while intelligence officers gathered data on the incoming fleet. Pilots readied their ships, ground forces took up defensive positions, and cyber units prepared to launch electronic warfare to disrupt enemy communications. Every aspect of Earth's defense was scrutinized and optimized for the battle that lay ahead. Humanity braced itself for what was to come, understanding that the Council would not expect the fierce resistance they were prepared to mount. Earth's leaders remained steadfast in their resolve, knowing that this battle could determine their future. They had no illusions about the odds they faced, but they were driven by an unyielding determination. As the countdown to the Council's deadline ticked away, the preparations continued, every citizen, every soldier, and every leader aware that they were about to engage in a struggle that would test their strength, their ingenuity, and their will to survive. The Council's fleet arrived in Earth's orbit with an imposing display of might. Massive warships, bristling with weaponry, filled the skies, broadcasting their demands for Earth's immediate surrender. Their commanders, confident in their overwhelming strength, reiterated their ultimatum, expecting compliance. When Earth's leaders remained defiant, refusing to submit, the Council decided to proceed with their planned assault. The fleet initiated a coordinated bombardment of Earth's orbital defenses, targeting communications satellites and defensive platforms. They anticipated minimal resistance and a swift collapse of Earth's defense grid, believing that the humans would quickly crumble under the sheer weight of the attack. But Earth's forces were ready. As the Council's fleet unleashed its firepower, Earth's military responded with a speed and precision that caught the attackers off guard. They had anticipated a frontal assault and had prepared a series of countermeasures designed to exploit the Council's predictable tactics. Decoy satellites, disguised as critical communication hubs, absorbed the initial bombardment, buying precious time. Electronic jamming devices were activated, flooding the Council's sensors with false signals and confusing their targeting systems. Meanwhile, smaller, faster human ships darted through the chaos, employing guerrilla-style attacks that targeted weak points in the larger ship's defenses. The Council's commanders, expecting a straightforward victory, were bewildered by the effectiveness of these unconventional tactics. Their larger ships, built for broadside engagements and heavy bombardment, struggled to track and engage the nimble human vessels. The smaller ships evaded the Council's heavy weapons, striking at vulnerable points, and then disappearing back into the void. Human forces operated with a fluidity and coordination that defied the Council's expectations. Communications were disrupted, commands were delayed, and the fleet's cohesive structure began to unravel. As the initial wave of attacks faltered, the Council's forces found themselves in disarray. Earth's countermeasures had disrupted their carefully planned assault, and the Council's ships began to suffer unexpected losses. Several of their smaller escort vessels were destroyed by focused strikes from human fighters, and their communication networks were in tatters due to the electronic jamming. Attempts to adjust their tactics were met with further confusion. Human forces anticipated their every move, responding with agility and adaptability that the Council's rigid command structure could not match. The realization began to sink in that Earth's defenses were far more resilient than anticipated. The initial bombardment had not crippled Earth's capabilities. Instead, it had exposed the flaws in the Council's strategy. The human forces, though outnumbered and outgunned, held their ground with surprising tenacity. Their unorthodox methods created chaos in the Council's ranks, forcing the fleet to retreat and regroup. What was meant to be a decisive display of power had turned into an embarrassing stalemate. The Council's commanders, now grappling with the unexpected turn of events, began to question their assumptions about humanity's resolve and capabilities. The first strike had not gone as planned, and they found themselves contemplating the unthinkable, that they might have underestimated their human adversaries. As their fleet regrouped and attempted to recover from the initial setback, doubt began to creep into their minds. What they had dismissed as a minor skirmish was proving to be a far more challenging conflict. The Council's chambers were filled with anger and confusion. Their leaders, accustomed to swift victories and unquestioned dominance, could not comprehend how Earth, a supposedly inferior species, had managed to resist their might. Accusations flew as they debated the reasons for their initial failure. Some blamed faulty intelligence, others the arrogance of their commanders, while a few began to wonder if they had underestimated the humans entirely. Frustration mounted as they struggled to understand how a single planet could withstand the might of their formidable fleet. Determined to crush the resistance and end the conflict quickly, the Council decided on a drastic escalation. They authorized the deployment of reinforcements, summoning their most advanced warships and elite troops. A new fleet, bristling with state-of-the-art weaponry and hardened battle units, was dispatched to Earth's orbit. The Council was convinced that this overwhelming force would finally break Earth's defenses and force their submission. The message was clear: they would not accept any outcome other than complete capitulation. But Earth's forces were far from defeated. They quickly adapted to the increased threat, implementing a layered defense strategy that took advantage of every asset at their disposal. The asteroid fields surrounding the planet were used for ambushes, where smaller, agile ships could hide and strike unexpectedly at the lumbering behemoths of the Council's fleet. Surprise counterattacks were launched against key supply lines, targeting the reinforcements before they could fully mobilize. The Council's forces found themselves facing an enemy that refused to fight by any conventional rules, leaving them perpetually confused and frustrated. Earth's defenses were not just physical but psychological. Human forces utilized guerrilla-style tactics that disrupted the Council's command and control systems. Electronic warfare continued to play a crucial role, jamming signals, spreading misinformation, and turning the Council's own technology against them. Each time the Council thought they had the upper hand, Earth's forces found new ways to counter their strategies, leaving them floundering in disarray. Amidst the escalating battle, human ingenuity became their greatest weapon. Scientists and engineers on Earth worked tirelessly, developing new technologies and repurposing existing civilian tech for military use. Improvised electromagnetic pulse devices were deployed to disable enemy shields, while drone swarms reprogrammed for kamikaze missions overwhelmed the Council's defenses. Makeshift defenses were built using whatever materials were at hand, creating unexpected obstacles for the advancing forces. The Council, despite their technological superiority, was caught off guard by the sheer adaptability and innovation of their adversary. The spirit of humanity was unyielding. Earth's leaders continued to broadcast messages of defiance, refusing to back down. They made it clear to their people and to the galaxy that they would fight to the last breath for their freedom. Each new challenge brought with it a renewed determination to stand firm against the overwhelming odds. The Council's reinforcements, which had been sent to crush Earth's resolve, found themselves entangled in a conflict that defied their expectations and exhausted their resources. As the battles continued, it became increasingly evident to the Council that they were facing not just a stubborn enemy but a species that thrived on adversity. What they had expected to be a swift victory was turning into a protracted struggle, one where their own strength was being used against them. The escalation had not brought the swift end they had hoped for. Instead, it had revealed the truth they were reluctant to accept, that Earth would not yield, no matter how great the cost. A series of intense battles erupted across space and on the ground, testing the limits of both the Council's might and Earth's resilience. Human forces, fully aware that they could not win through sheer firepower, leaned into their unconventional tactics. They employed hit-and-run maneuvers that exploited the Council's rigid formations, striking swiftly before retreating into asteroid fields or dense planetary atmospheres where larger enemy ships struggled to follow. Sabotage missions targeted the Council's key supply depots and fuel reserves, crippling their logistics and forcing them to expend resources just to maintain their position. Psychological warfare played a significant role in Earth's strategy. They used hacking to broadcast false orders, creating confusion and mistrust among the Council's ranks. Ghost signals appeared on the Council's radar, suggesting threats that weren't there, drawing them into wild chases across sectors while real attacks struck elsewhere. The Council's troops, unaccustomed to such resistance and the constant mental strain, began to falter. What had once been seen as a minor skirmish was becoming a drawn-out nightmare, with every day bringing new setbacks and frustrations. As the battles raged on, the Council's commanders grew increasingly aware that Earth was not fighting to win in the traditional sense. They were fighting to bleed the Council dry. Human tactics, though unconventional, were effective in causing chaos and disarray. The Council's forces began to suffer heavy casualties, far more than they had anticipated. Supply lines were severed by coordinated attacks, leaving troops stranded and vulnerable. Communication networks were repeatedly disrupted, delaying reinforcements and further isolating their units. The logistical challenges mounted, and morale among the Council's forces began to crumble under the relentless pressure. The realization began to spread among the Council's leadership: Earth would not surrender. Every attempt to subdue them was met with fierce resistance, and every presumed victory was turned into a costly stalemate. Council commanders, once confident in their ability to dominate, found themselves questioning their strategy and even their chances of success. They had underestimated Earth's resolve, and the consequences of that mistake were becoming painfully clear. A pivotal moment came during a major confrontation in a remote star system, where a key segment of the Council's fleet had been dispatched to secure a critical supply route. Earth's forces, appearing outnumbered, engaged in what seemed like a desperate defense. The Council, sensing a chance to crush a significant portion of Earth's resistance, launched a full-scale assault. Human ships, however, began to retreat, seemingly unable to hold their ground. The Council's fleet, eager for a decisive victory, pursued them deeper into the system. Unbeknownst to them, the retreat was a feint. Earth's ships lured the Council's forces into a narrow asteroid field, where maneuverability was severely restricted. Hidden mines detonated, taking out the lead ships and blocking any retreat. Human vessels, previously in disarray, suddenly regrouped and launched a coordinated counterattack from multiple directions. The Council's fleet, trapped and unable to maneuver, found themselves at the mercy of Earth's concentrated firepower. Within minutes, several of their most important ships were destroyed, and the remainder were forced into a hasty, disorganized withdrawal. The victory was decisive and sent shockwaves through the Council's leadership. For the first time, they saw a clear demonstration of Earth's tactical superiority, a moment where their vast technological advantage was rendered irrelevant by human ingenuity and strategy. The morale boost for Earth was palpable, while within the Council, doubts and fears began to fester. They were no longer facing a primitive opponent, but a formidable adversary capable of outthinking them at every turn. The depth of their miscalculation was becoming all too evident, forcing them to reconsider their entire approach. With their forces depleted and morale waning, the Council found itself at a crossroads. Losses were mounting at an alarming rate, and no clear path to victory was in sight. The leadership convened once more, their frustration and anxiety evident. The debate was fierce. Some of the more hawkish members pushed for an all-out final assault, believing that a decisive, overwhelming strike could still force Earth's submission. Others, however, argued for a different approach. They suggested a negotiated settlement, fearing that further escalation would only result in greater losses and perhaps the total collapse of their authority. The Council was deeply divided, uncertain of how to proceed against an enemy that had proven so unexpectedly resilient. Amid this turmoil, Earth's defiance only grew stronger. The humans broadcast messages across the galaxy, declaring their unwavering resolve and determination to remain free. They made it clear that surrender was not in their protocol, that they would fight to the very last person if necessary. These declarations spread far and wide, reaching not only the Council's members but also other species who had watched the conflict unfold. Reports from the Council's spies and scouts confirmed the truth of these broadcasts. Humanity was fully prepared to continue resisting, no matter the cost. Gradually, the realization began to dawn on the Council's leaders. They were facing an enemy unlike any they had encountered before. They had expected fear, compliance, or at least a willingness to negotiate. Instead, they found an unbreakable spirit, a refusal to bow even in the face of overwhelming force. The Council's strategies, which had crushed countless civilizations before, were proving ineffective against a foe that valued freedom above all else. They acknowledged, reluctantly, that their attempts to force submission had failed and that continuing the conflict would only lead to further losses and humiliation. With no other viable options, the Council made the difficult decision to withdraw their forces. They recognized that Earth was not just another rebellious planet to be subdued but a species with a resolve and spirit that could not be broken. The order was given to pull back, and the fleets began to retreat from human space, a clear acknowledgement that they could not achieve their goal. It was an admission that resonated throughout the galaxy, a silent acknowledgement of defeat from the most powerful coalition ever known. In the aftermath, Earth sent a final message to the galaxy. "We do not seek war, but we will never surrender. To those who would try to force our submission, understand that we will fight until our last breath." The words carried a weight that could not be ignored, echoing across countless worlds. Humanity had proven itself in the most definitive way, showing not just the Council but all who watched that they were a force to be reckoned with, a species that would not bow or break. Reflecting on the conflict, it was clear that a new chapter had begun. Earth's refusal to surrender, its unyielding stance against overwhelming odds, became a beacon of defiance for others who felt oppressed or marginalized. The ripple effect of their stand spread far beyond their home planet, challenging the very foundations of the Council's authority. The defeat marked a turning point, a moment when the galaxy learned that even the most powerful coalition could be challenged when faced with a species that would not submit. The human spirit, once dismissed, now stood as a testament to the power of resilience and the strength of a people determined to remain free.